The snow came early that year. Not a gentle dusting, but a sharp, relentless storm that rolled in from the northwest, burying the hills and choking the trails before the leaves had finished turning. In the high mountain pass between Dry Ridge and the Silver Range, even the pines looked startled, bent beneath the weight of winter's early warning. The wind howled like it remembered every name of the dead, and still she stayed. Her name was Evelyn Moore, 31, widow, unclaimed. She lived alone in a one-room cabin tucked behind a thicket of aspens where no roads reached and no one cared to go. Not since her husband died in a mining collapse 4 years ago. Not since she chose not to remarry. The townsfolk had offered polite pity at first, then whispers, then silence. That suited Evelyn fine. She spoke little anyway, mostly to herself or to the wild dog that trailed her like a shadow. Her days were filled with wood chopping, trapping rabbits, tending to a stubborn chimney, and boiling creek water that tasted faintly of iron. Nights were lonelier, long stretches of quiet punctuated by the ticking of a wind-up clock and the crackle of dry pine on the fire. But she never cried. Not anymore. Evelyn had learned long ago that tears were a luxury, a softness she couldn't afford, not in a world where the cold could kill faster than sorrow. It was the fourth night of snow when she heard the horse. Not a wagon, not a rider coming from town, not anyone she could name. Just a sudden clatter of hooves, wild, stumbling, and then silence. Then something heavy hitting the ground. She waited. Not out of fear, but out of instinct. Minutes passed. The wind pushed hard against her window shutters. Then, a sound that wasn't wind. A dragging. A muffled groan. She opened the door, and the world stood still. There, half buried in snow, near the edge of the tree line, was a man. A native man. Face bloodied, shirt torn, his horse gone, his leg bent wrong. He clutched his side with one hand, the other arm dragging uselessly in the snow. And his eyes, dark, burning, wild, locked onto hers with the defiance of a wolf and the exhaustion of a dying bird. She knew what he was, Comanche. She knew what helping him meant, and yet she stepped into the storm. The wind bit at her cheeks as she trudged forward, boots sinking deep into the powder. When she reached him, he tried to lift a knife, hands trembling, breath shallow, but she only said one word: "Don't." Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't soft either. It was calm, like firelight on stone. He hesitated, then collapsed. She knelt beside him, fingers searched quickly, checking the gash at his ribs, the swelling at his ankle, the deep cut along his temple. He was freezing, losing blood, no more than 25, maybe less. "Help me help you," she whispered. He didn't answer, but he didn't resist either. It took her nearly an hour to get him inside. The dog barked once, then quieted. The man was heavy, dead weight from shock and pain. She dragged, pulled, lifted, her back screaming, lungs burning, until she finally rolled him beside the fire and slammed the door shut against the wind. Then the real work began. She boiled water, cut cloth from an old curtain, removed his boots, one broken, pulled aside his tunic and stared for the first time at the tattoos inked across his chest, marks of war, of tribe, of honor. She hesitated only a second before stitching the gash with careful hands. The man woke once, flinching.
She met his gaze. "You move, you bleed," she said softly. He held her eyes, didn't speak, but didn't move either. She nodded, dipped the cloth, and kept going. Hours passed. The wind howled, the fire dimmed. She wrapped his ankle, set a poultice over his wound, laid a folded blanket under his head. Then, without asking why or what or who he was, she returned to her chair by the fire and watched him breathe. Sleep didn't come. Something in her chest was too awake, not afraid, but aware, like something sacred had stepped into the room and changed the shape of everything inside it. She thought of her husband, how he used to whistle when he came home from the mine, how he smelled of soot and cedar, how his boots always left a trail of mud she never minded cleaning, and how when the mountain ate him, no one bothered to dig deep, just a slab of rock with a name misspelled, and silence. Evelyn reached for the kettle, poured a small cup, and let the steam rise between them like a veil. She glanced at the stranger again. His chest moved slow, shallow, but steady. She didn't know if he'd live through the night. She didn't know why she'd brought him in. All she knew was this. The moment she looked into his eyes, she saw something breakable, something proud, something alone, just like her. And maybe, she thought, as she pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders, maybe saving him wasn't the strangest thing she'd done after all. Because sometimes, in the dead of winter, a heart remembers how to thaw.
Evelyn didn't sleep that night, not fully. She dozed in her chair near the fire, eyes half-lidded, ears tuned to every shallow breath from the man on her floor. The wind howled through the chimney like it was mourning something no one would name. And the dog, Buck, never moved from its spot near the door, as if guarding both her and him. Dawn came slow, gray and heavy, thick with drifting snow. When Evelyn stirred from her half-dreams and turned toward the figure beside the hearth, she found him watching her. His eyes were clearer now, less wild, more human, still wary, still guarded, but no longer drifting between worlds. "You're awake," she said, voice low. The man didn't reply. He looked at her, then at the room, then down at his ankle, tightly wrapped, and the stitched wound across his ribs. And he did something unexpected. He looked ashamed. Evelyn poured water from the kettle into a dented tin cup, let it cool, and knelt beside him. "Drink." He didn't take it at first. She didn't flinch. "It's just water, from the creek." Boiled it. Finally, with a shaking hand, he took the cup and drank slowly. His throat worked hard with each swallow. When he finished, he handed it back to her without a word. She nodded once. A minute passed, then two, and then, in a voice dry as dust and rough with exhaustion, he said, "Why?" One word, spoken like it hurt to say. Evelyn didn't answer at first. She poured more water, stood, fed the fire. The cabin was quiet except for the occasional snap of pine wood and the soft ticking of the mantel clock. "Because you were dying," she finally said. "You don't know me." "No." "I'm Comanche." "I noticed." "You shouldn't have helped me." She turned then, faced him full on. Her eyes weren't angry, just tired, but not defeated. "You were bleeding, in my snow, outside my home. I don't care what name the world gives you."
He stared at her.
"What name do they give you?" he asked. She paused. Then, widow, witch, fool, take your pick. A ghost of a smile almost touched his lips. Almost. "They called me Waya," he said. "It means wolf." She nodded slowly. "Waya." He looked away. "My people, if they find me here." "They won't," she said. "Storm's too thick, no trail left." Waya didn't respond, but he didn't argue either. His fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the blanket. She noticed his nails were cracked. Dried blood still clung to the edge of his palm. She fetched a clean cloth and knelt again, gently dipping it in warm water. "Let me see your hand." He hesitated, but let her. She cleaned it slowly, carefully, like she might have done with the wounded hawk. The pads of her fingers brushed his skin. He flinched once, not from pain, from surprise. She looked up at him. "You've been hunted before," she said. He didn't answer. "You still are?" His jaw clenched. Then he nodded. Evelyn lowered her gaze. "Well," she said softly, "for now, you're not." Hours passed. She fed him broth made from root vegetables and dried meat, spooning it bit by bit when he couldn't lift his arm. He tried to refuse. She ignored that. Her hands were patient, steady. Her voice never rose. In return, he began to speak. Not much. Never about his tribe. Never about why he'd been riding alone in the snow, so far from Comanche land. But he asked her name, Evelyn. He repeated it once, softly, as if tasting its weight. He asked how long she'd been here. 4 years. He asked if anyone ever came. No, not anymore. Good, he replied. And that one word, spoken low but sincere, sat between them like a promise. That evening, when she lit the single lantern above the door and began preparing her own supper, she caught him watching her. Not like a man watches a woman, not with hunger, but with something more reverent, as if he didn't understand how someone could live so long alone and still be kind. And maybe she didn't understand either.
Later, she brought a chair closer to the fire and sat beside him. Neither of them spoke. Buck lay curled near the hearth, tail twitching. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, something warmer settled into the space between them. Then, softly, Waya broke the silence. "I thought I was going to die," he said. She didn't look at him. "I thought you might too. I didn't want to die alone. You weren't." He turned his head. "I still might," he said. She met his gaze. "Then I'll still be here." The way he looked at her then, long, searching, almost disbelieving, was not the look of a man in love, not yet, but it was the look of someone who, for the first time in a long time, believed he might not have to run forever. That night, she helped him shift on to the cot. His breathing was steadier now, his hands less cold. She tucked the blanket around him, placed the tin of herbs nearby in case he woke in pain. Before turning to go, she paused. "You saved me too," she said quietly. He frowned. "I didn't do anything." "No, but it's been a long time since I had someone to take care of." Waya didn't speak, but when she stepped away and blew out the lantern, she swore she heard him whisper, "Then I'll stay alive." The snow thickened through the night, and in the shadows outside, hidden by pine and silence, 4 shapes waited. They watched the chimney smoke. They saw the wolf's trail vanish at the door, and they did not move. Not yet. But morning was coming, and with it, the reckoning. Morning came as a hush, not a herald. The wind had calmed, snow had softened the world into stillness, laying a white silence across the pines, the hills, the broken fence around Evelyn's garden. Her chimney still breathed a thin line of smoke into the pale dawn, but below it, tracks had begun to form. Hoofprints. Not 1, not 2, many. Wyatt knew it before she did. He'd been lying still on the cot, eyes half-lidded as Evelyn stirred from sleep. But his body had gone stiff sometime around dawn, his breathing shallow. His ears were tuned to the low crunch of snow outside, the subtle creak of leather, a cough, low and sharp, from somewhere out of sight. He knew that sound. It was the cough of a rider who'd slipped under stars all winter. A Comanche warrior, long-distance traveling, probably his cousin, or worse, his brother. Wyatt sat up, sweat already forming on his brow despite the chill. Evelyn noticed. "What is it?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he swung his legs off the cot, wincing, and reached for the hunting knife she kept above the mantel. Evelyn froze. "Don't!" He paused, breathing hard. "They're here." Her heart thudded. "Your people?" He gave her one look. It was answer enough. Outside, Buck started growling, a low, vibrating warning from deep in his throat. Wyatt moved to the window and peered through a crack in the boards. 4 riders, all on painted horses, faces painted red and black, war braid feathers. No war cries, no shouts, just silence and stillness. They waited like shadows at the edge of the tree line, watching, assessing. "They haven't charged," Evelyn said, voice tight. "No. Why not?" He turned to her. "Because they want to see if I'm alive." She stepped back. He saw the fear behind her eyes, not of him, but of what was coming. He reached out, hand bloodied, trembling, and touched her wrist. "I need you to stay inside. If they see you first, they'll think you're the captor, not the healer." "I won't hide. You have to." "No." He met her eyes. His voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "They'll kill you." Evelyn stared at him, then slowly shook her head. The door creaked open into the snow. Evelyn stepped out first. No rifle, no coat, just her wool shawl wrapped tight, and a single sprig of sage tucked in her palm, a symbol of peace she hoped they'd recognize. Wyatt followed, limping, leaning on the door frame for support. The riders didn't move until they saw him. Then all 4 dismounted, and one, older, stern-eyed, scarred along the cheek, strode forward. Wyatt took a breath. "Pahano!" he called hoarsely. The man stopped, brows lifting in astonishment. Then something like relief washed over his face, breath, flickering, but it faded just as quickly to suspicion. "You live." "I do." "And this woman?" "She saved me." Pahano turned his gaze to Evelyn. He spoke slowly. You are alone? I am, she answered. No husband? No. No tribe? Not anymore. The warrior looked her over. His eyes weren't cruel, but sharp, like a man trained his whole life to read lies faster than breath. Then he turned to Wea. You rode too far. I was followed. By soldiers? No. White men. Drunk. Hunting. Pahano nodded once. Why did she help you? She doesn't see enemies, only wounds. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the warrior stepped forward, pulled something from his belt, a strand of woven horsehair, dark and red-tipped, and held it out. Evelyn took it, unsure. A token, Wea said, of protection. From what? From them. But as he said it, a new sound rose in the distance, not from the trees, but from the ridge above. Hoofbeats. Another rider, this one fast, desperate, kicking up snow like ash. He wore no paint, only a long brown coat and a white hat, the mark of a settler. Evelyn's stomach dropped. She knew him. John Creighton, the sheriff's son, and he was coming fast.
Creighton didn't stop until he saw them all. Evelyn, Waya, the 4 Comanche, and the dog barking wild beside them. He pulled his horse hard. "What the hell's going on here?" he shouted, reaching for the rifle strapped behind his saddle. Evelyn stepped forward, hands raised. "Don't, John, please." "What is that red bastard doing on your porch?" "He's under my roof." "He shouldn't be anywhere near you." "I saved his life." John spit in the snow. "You really are a witch." Pahano stepped forward then, no weapon drawn, but his stare like a flint. "This land was once ours," he said. John laughed bitterly. "And now it's law." Waya limped between them. "No one needs to bleed." John pointed at him. "You already did." Waya's jaw tensed. Evelyn's voice broke through the cold. "John, if you fire that gun, you'll start something you can't end." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then the rifle cocked. But Buck lunged, and chaos shattered the snow. Waya tackled John from his horse. The rifle fell. Pahano shouted in Comanche. The other riders drew bows, but didn't loose. Evelyn screamed as Buck snarled and snapped. Then it ended as fast as it began. Waya stood over John, breathing hard, fist clenched, but he hadn't struck the final blow. Instead, he let him crawl away. "Go," he said. John spat blood, glared at Evelyn, then limped toward his horse, leaving rage steaming behind him in the snow. Pahano looked at Waya. "You spared him." Waya nodded. "I am not who they think I am." Then he looked at Evelyn, and something in him cracked. "I don't want to run anymore." She stepped closer. "Then stay." And just like that, he dropped the knife. Let the snow take it. Let the wind bury it. Let the war end. 3 days after the blizzard, the snow began to melt. Not from the sun, but from the warmth rising from Evelyn's roof more than ever before. Inside that tiny cabin, 2 souls had come back from the edge, not once, but twice. Waya lived. The wounds across his belly, shoulder, and chest still oozed when he turned, but his fevered eyes no longer burned.
and Evelyn's hands, so used to serving only herself, now remembered how to hold a bowl for someone else. One hand for her, one for him. Outside the porch, the snow dipped from footprints. Not just Buck's, the old loyal dog, but others, horsemen, riders, Comanche riders. They came daily, quiet as wind through pine. None broke gates, none drew weapons. They came only to leave things, a bundle of herbs, a parcel of deer meat, a necklace of carved bone, a small bowl painted with a red sun. No words, only presence, as if saying something too sacred for language. "We're not ones to owe favors," Waya said quietly, eyes fixed on the ridge. "We don't believe in blood debts, not even kindness debts." Evelyn asked, "Then what is this?" Waya answered with a hushed reverence, "This is how we say, if anyone touches you again, there'll be nowhere left for them to hide." That evening, the town held its breath. Far east of the fields, the church lookouts dropped their spyglass. Across the prairie, a formation emerged from the snow like a rising tide, a long line of riders. Not waving guns, not raising flags, no war drums, just 100 Comanche warriors, bare-chested, eagle-feathered, wrapped in hides, riding in pairs. Their horses struck the snow in even rhythm, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. They didn't ride toward the chapel. They didn't march into the center. They turned toward the lone cabin by the trees, Evelyn's home. Waya was already on the porch. He had heard them long before anyone else. He didn't stand, didn't reach for his knife. He just looked at Evelyn, who held a bowl of water in trembling hands and nodded like he'd been expecting them. The riders stopped just feet from the porch. None spoke until a young Comanche girl, barely 16, stepped forward. She held a pouch of deerskin. Her eyes, as black as midnight stone, locked with Evelyn's. Then she knelt. The pouch opened. Inside was a name. Not in letters, but in symbols stitched onto circular leather. An open hand next to a broken heart mended with red thread. Waya murmured, They've given you a name." Evelyn blinked, uncertain. "A name?" He nodded slowly. "This is how we say, you saved one of us. You're not outsider anymore. This is your naming. They call you Left Hand, Sleepless Heart, the woman who did not turn away from blood, the one who held her heart open while the world shut its doors."
That night, her cabin glowed like a wedding lantern. Pahano, the elder, the same one who once aimed a rifle, came last. He brought nothing but a wooden staff. At the top was a letter, written in careful English. Just one line. "We remember those who save life." Then he pulled something small from his robe, a flat piece of wood carved with a winged bird rising from flame. "Place it by your gate," he said. "Wherever this stands, Comanche arrows do not fly." Waya bowed his head. Evelyn didn't speak. She simply placed her hand over her heart, where it beat like thunder. By moonrise, the porch was draped in silver light. Comanche children laughed by the stream, tossing stones. Their horses breathed warm clouds into the dark. Buck, the old dog, slept by the feet of a young warrior. Evelyn stepped out of the cabin. She sat beside Waya, shoulder nearly touching. He handed her a cup of wild tea. They didn't speak for a long time. Only the crackle of fire, the scent of pine smoke. Finally, she whispered, "If I hadn't found you that night, what would have happened?" Waya looked at her. The flames danced in his eyes,
eyes shaped by years of silence, exile, and pursuit. He didn't answer right away. Then slowly, then no one would have known that a woman forgotten by the world could do something a whole tribe is now indebted to. Evelyn gripped the cup tighter. "I owe you nothing." "No," he said. "I owe you the only thing I ever lost, a reason to trust again." Wind stirred the letter on the post. It flapped once, then lay still. And in the hush that followed, something shifted, not just between them, but in the ground, between people, between tribes, between wounds and the will to forgive.
By the time the lilacs bloomed again, the war drums had stopped. Not because the war was over, but because something older than vengeance had bloomed beneath the snow, a kind of peace that could not be declared, only lived. Evelyn no longer counted days by the sting of loneliness. She no longer flinched when boots hit her porch, and when she woke each morning, she no longer reached first for a rifle, but for warmth beside her, sometimes Wya's hand, sometimes just the quiet memory of it. Spring came like a secret whispered in the trees, and with it, a decision. They didn't speak of it as leaving. It wasn't running. It wasn't exile. It was something gentler than either, like a seed finally pushed free of frost. The town hadn't hurt her since, but it hadn't come to knock either. No apologies, no questions, no names remembered. So when Wya asked, one evening while sharpening his blade, "Would you go?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. She touched the small wooden carving by her gate, the bird rising from fire. She looked at the creek where children had once jeered her, now just water and stone. And she thought of silence, not the silence of loneliness, but of space made for something new. Finally, she said, "I wouldn't stay." They left on a Tuesday, not in the middle of the night, but in full daylight, after feeding the hens and brushing down the horse. Wya carried a pack of herbs, his bow slung across his back, and a small basket Evelyn had woven herself, one she insisted he use even if he claimed it was too fine for a warrior. She took almost nothing, just the blue shawl she wore the night she found him, and the letter from the Comanche elder, folded and placed near her heart. They didn't say goodbye to the town, but a few faces watched them from windows. One man removed his hat. One woman clasped her hands tight, as if praying she'd find what the town never gave. No words, but this time the silence didn't bite. The land changed beneath their boots, first green, then gold, then red earth and rising cliffs. At dusk they passed a narrow canyon where children of both bloods, white and Comanche, ran through sagebrush, chasing goats, laughing in two languages. Evelyn's breath caught at the sound, not because she understood either tongue, but because laughter, when it's free, always sounds the same. Wya looked at her. "Home's not a place," he said. "It's where no one asks you to disappear." They made their camp that night beneath stars, and Evelyn dreamed of firelight, not as something that burned, but that gathered.
A week later, they reached the mesa. Wya's people had long left that place, but the bones of old lodges still stood. The land was quiet, not abandoned, but resting. They rebuilt one with their own hands. She mixed clay, he shaped the walls. She planted thyme, he caught fish. And when the rains came, they held each other by the doorway, not for shelter, but for reverence. One day, a group of children came from the southern trail. They had heard stories of the woman with the open hand, and they brought more than stories, a
a blanket of dyed cotton, a painted drum, seeds, songs. Evelyn had never had children of her own, but in their laughter, in their wide, sun-touched faces, she didn't feel the lack, only the gift of being chosen, not by blood, but by spirit. And time moved, like it always does. One evening, years later, Wea sat by the door, his hair silvered now, still long. Evelyn was inside, finishing a carving. It was a gift for a girl getting married in the next village, a girl who once placed a stone carved at Evelyn's feet and called her Mother of Second Chances. Wea whispered through the open door, "There's a bird outside." Evelyn stepped out, wiping dust from her hands. On the fence post stood a lone hawk, watching, unmoving. And as they stood side by side, hands brushing, the bird took flight, wings wide, strong, rising into a sky that held no clouds, only endless blue. Wea said, "You were the hawk once." Evelyn shook her head softly. "No," she said, "I was the cage. You were the one who opened it." He turned to her then, his voice a hush only she could hear. "We were both buried once, but we didn't stay that way." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "And that's the difference," she whispered. "Some people bury, others dig." The mesa held their story like earth holds root. They were not saints, not legends, just two quiet people who said yes to life when everyone else said no. And in a world where kindness was often punished, they found a love that healed without needing permission. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay.